Welcome, delegates, to our RentBook training. Waylon, it's our first
RentBook webinar for the year.
It's our first online RentBook session for the year. I'm so excited.
Welcome, guys.
Welcome. I mean, Waylon, you support 2,500
RentBook clients.
RentBook clients, loading data, invoicing their tenants on a monthly basis. And that's why these online sessions are really, really so important.
So we can reach everyone.
So we can reach everyone, exactly. Waylon, can you just run me through the agenda for our delegates today?
Okay, so we'll be loading a property and advertising the property directly from RentBook, which will then feed through to our advertising site called RentPay, which is also free, and you can go directly there as well if you're not using RentBook. We're going to load an applicant and also perform a credit check on the applicant. And once the applicant is passed, we're going to then load the applicant against the property with a lease and then start invoicing the tenant from the RentBook system.
Okay, so the main point around today is we credit check your tenant because we want a tenant who has both the means, the affordability, and the willingness to pay.
100% yes, Mish.
And then the invoicing is quite important because our data science shows that the sending of an invoice has an impact on your ability to collect.
Yes, 100%, Mish. So between the 20th and the 25th, if an invoice is sent, you are more than likely to collect your rent on time and in full.
So effectively, we looked at all the invoices on the TPN Credit Bureau and we looked at the send date.
100%, yes.
And we understood that there's a T-7 to T-10, giving us the 20th to the 25th. People get paid on the 25th, so that makes sense. You get paid and you pay your rent immediately.
100%. Now, what's also nice about using the RentBook system is it also reminds you 10 days prior to the payment due date that an invoice is due to be sent.
So we remind our clients remind our tenants, and tenants pay their rent.
100%.
Fantastic. Whereas I'm going to fade into the background for the moment because actually my job and responsibility here is just to facilitate the Q&A. So for our clients, best to log into your YouTube channel, right? You'll see the chat then come up and you can then start asking your questions on the chat, and my role is to facilitate those. So ask your questions. As we go through, if there's a question that's relevant to what you are training on,
then.
Cool, I'm going to stop you and we're going to answer it. And if the question is more general, I'm going to wait till each of your sections,
100%.
have a quick Q&A after each section, and then we'll do a final Q&A right at the end.
Okay.
Fantastic.
I'm
going to fade away then to the back.
Thank you,
Over
Mish.
to you. Thanks, Waylon.
Okay. Thanks, Mish. Morning, everyone. Welcome to the first RentBook webinar for the year. Okay, so RentBook is an online rental invoicing system. All you need is internet access, and it's almost free. The most you pay for the RentBook system is 600 Rand per year. Now, all you need to have is internet access and you'll be able to use the RentBook system. Now, once you've registered on the RentBook system, you go to rentbook.co.za and you then click log in. When clicking on log in, it asks you for your email address that you registered with, as well as the password you created when you registered. Now, whenever you log on to the RentBook system, this is the default screen you'll see, which is called your dashboard. It basically gives you an overview of what's happening within your RentBook account. It tells you if you've got any invoices due, and like I said, 10 days prior to an invoice due date, your invoices due will come up. Rent due, rent only becomes due once an invoice has been sent from the RentBook system. Bills due, those are bills that needs to be paid to any third party, like your body corporate, municipality, and so forth. And then deposits due, any deposit that's still outstanding. Then deposits held. The deposit held can be shown if it is held either by a landlord or by the agent. And then the system also shows you how many properties you've got loaded on the system. Of those properties, how many are occupied, as well as how many are vacant. And the system also shows you how many leases you've got loaded, of them how many are active and how many are expired. Now, when a lease becomes expired on the RentBook system, it doesn't automatically terminate the lease. You need to go and cancel the lease or either extend the lease. Now, what's also nice about using the RentBook system, it reminds you if a lease is coming up for renewals in the next 90, 60, or 30 days. As you can see, we've got one renewal on the system. Then fees due. Fees due is only applicable if you are registered on the system as an agent, and that money is due to you as the agent. And then payments. Payments, that's payments that needs to be made out to your landlords. And like we said earlier, our point of discussion is actually loading of properties. So you basically start off by loading the actual property. So you click on properties and add a property. Now when you click on add a property, it brings up two screens for you, a map as well as where you can actually enter the property address. But you need to physically go and enter the address on the actual maps. So when you enter the address, it brings up a list of possible addresses or matches to choose from, and you just click on the address, and then you just need to verify where this particular property is situated, and you can drag the cursor to wherever this property is situated, and you'll see that it populates the address, the actual address for you on the right hand side. Now the property details is loaded, and now it asks to enter a landlord. So we're going to add a new landlord. Now the landlord type defaults to a consumer. If this property is in the name of a business, you can then change the type to business. Okay, so I'm going to leave it as consumer, and we're going to enter the landlord's name and surname. And you can also add the landlord's email address as well as contact number, and this is only for reference purposes. There is a report on the system where you can export all the contact information of the tenants, landlords, as well as your vendors from the actual system. You also have the option to add additional email addresses for your landlord, as well as an additional contact number for your landlord as well as your tenant. So once you've entered the information, you click save. Now the property category defaults to residential property. If this is a commercial or industrial property, you can then change the category and then load that particular property. Now the type of property, what type of property are you loading? Is it a house, a flat, a cottage, an apartment? And you choose the appropriate property type. And how many bedrooms does this particular property have? And the building size. The building size is not mandatory, but if you do have it, you can then input it on the system. Once you've added all the information regarding the property, you then click create property, and the property is created, as simple as that. Okay.
Waylon, I've just got a question.
Yes, Mish.
We want to understand, is the same process for loading a property for a landlord's profile the same as if the agent's doing it on behalf of the landlord?
It's exactly the same. The only option the landlords will not have is to add a landlord, because they are the actual landlord of the property. So they'll only enter they'll only have the option to enter the property information.
Perfect.
Excluding the landlord. So like we earlier explained, we are loading a property, and then you also have the option to advertise the property directly from the RentBook system. So you can then click at the top, there's an advertise tab, and then it asks you to fill in the property, the advert details. What do you want to put in there? And then you put in the full description of the actual property. You put in the contact person's name, contact number, as well as the contact email address. Then you put in the advertised rental amount and when this property is available from, and it defaults to residential because you added that it is a residential property. It's a house, bedroom, how many bathrooms this property has. So you'll enter all that information and then save advert. Once you click save advert, it then gives you the option to add images. So you click on the edit images tab, and then you just need to choose where these images are stored. You'll then click on the images you want to load, upload file. So you'll have to do this for each image you want to load on the actual advert. Once you've added all the images, it will show you the images here. You just click on publish now, and this ad will then be published directly on our RentPay, our free advertising site.
Well, and I've got a question from Celeste. She's asking, what happens if she has a landlord who has a house with multiple granny flats?
Okay, so with regards to a landlord with multiple leases, for each lease, you need to load a new property on the RentBook system.
Perfect.
Okay.
So that would mean I would load the house as a lease.
Yes.
If I'm an estate agent and I've got one landlord and I have a house and the house has multiple granny flats,
You'll have to load the property multiple times. So each property will be then linked to a specific lease.
and a landlord would be linked to each property, the house, and each granny flat
100% yes.
individually. But you're not loading the landlord multiple times.
No,
you're just
the
linking
landlord
them.
will be loaded once. The landlord will have 5, or depending on how many properties or leases he's got on the system, the landlord will show that there's one landlord with multiple properties on the system.
Perfect.
Okay, so now the property is advertised and we've got an applicant that filled out an application form. We can now go and load the applicant on the system and then also perform a credit check on this particular applicant. Now, to load the applicant, you go to Tenants and then you add the tenant as an applicant. So you add the tenant and then you add the tenant's details. Now, before I do that, I just want to explain there are 2 types of tenants. One is a consumer and the other one is a business. If this is a business with a registration number or with a trust number, you can then load the tenant as a business. But in this particular case, this tenant is a consumer with an ID number and we're going to load the tenant's details. So you'll enter all the details the tenant provided you on the application form, add the tenant's ID number, and then you add the tenant's email address, the tenant's contact number, as well as the tenant's address he's currently residing at.
Well, and why do we add the tenant's address where he's currently residing at and not the address that we are looking to rent to him?
Okay, because he's not residing, he's not in the actual property as yet, Mish. He's still applying for this particular property. And then also, so that we can have a track record of where this particular tenant has previously stayed at when we perform a credit check, Mish. Okay, so we enter all the information for this particular tenant, suburb. Okay, the banking details is not a mandatory field. You can add it if you want to. Like I said earlier, there is a report that you can export from the system where it has the contact information as well as banking details of your tenants, vendors, and landlords. So once you've entered all the information, you then click Create Tenant, and this particular tenant has then been created. As you can see, the state of the tenant is an applicant. We haven't accepted the tenant as yet because we still need to perform a credit check on this particular tenant. Now, we can then click on the credit checks tab and then add a new credit check. Now, when you click add a new credit check, it directs you to the actual TPN Credit Bureau site to complete the credit check on this particular tenant. So once you've performed the credit check, this is how the actual credit check results looks. So it gives you the credit check for this particular tenant, the applicant, which is Fred Smith. And if this tenant has a new smart ID, we'll then have the tenant's actual picture as well as the scoring of this particular tenant. Okay. And then also the system, the credit check gives you an overview of how many accounts this particular tenant has, what his current balance is, his monthly installment, as well as if he's in arrears. And at this particular point is where you can then make a decision on whether you're going to accept this tenant or not. Okay, so now this particular tenant that we've loaded, we've accepted the tenant, and we can also now go and accept the tenant on the RentBook system. So if you go to tenants, okay, you go to tenants, you won't see Fred Smith because he's not yet an active tenant, he's an applicant. So you just change the filter to applicants and you'll see that all your applicants that you've loaded on the system will appear, and you can then click on the tenant and then accept the tenant. It's then going to ask you, where do you want to accept the tenant to, which property? So you then click on the drop down and it brings up if all your properties that are vacant, and you'll choose the actual property, or you can then just type in the address and it will bring up that specific property for you to choose. So we choose the particular property, and now this is where we enter the lease details according to your lease agreement. When this lease is going to start. So this lease is going to start on the 1st of December, and the system is so clever, it also sets a lease end date for a 12-month period. If this lease is a 6-month period, you can then change the end date to whatever the lease agreement says on the system. And rent is due monthly, and the rent due day is the 1st, and we then enter the actual monthly rental amount that we're going to be billing to the tenant. Then last but not least, at the bottom is where it says optional. Here's where you enter the procurement/management fee that will be charged to the landlord associated with this property. Now, your procurement fee is your once-off commission you bill to the landlord, and your management fee is your monthly commission you bill to the landlord. Now, to add your procurement fee, you just click on the calculator and you can put in the percentage that you are billing to this particular landlord and calculate, and it automatically calculates the procurement/placement fee. And the same goes for the management fee. Enter a percentage and it automatically works it out for you. If it is a fixed amount, you can just type in the amounts in there. Okay, then once we've entered all the information, we then go next. And the next step is then where we are saying what type of or what deposit are we requiring from this tenant. Now it asks, what deposit do I require? And we've got different options, either no deposit from the tenant, 1 month, 1.5 months, 2 months, or a custom deposit. Now the 4 above is pretty straightforward. If you click on any of them, it automatically works out what deposit you are going to be invoicing the tenant. I like to use the last option, whereby you bill the tenant a 1-month rental deposit plus a 2,000 rand utilities and a 1,000 rand key deposit. Now then, this is where you then specify or say what deposit you require, which is it's 23,000 rand. And then we go next. And the next step, it says this is the deposit that we will be invoicing to this tenant on his invoice. Now we want this deposit shown as per item, damage deposit, utilities, and key deposit. And at this particular point is where you can actually itemize the deposit. So you just click on edit, and I like to change my description, damage deposit. And what is my damage deposit? It's 20,000 rand. Save and close. We then add another deposit due item, and this is a utilities deposit of 2,000 rand. And last but not least, the last deposit, which is key deposit of 1,000 rand. Save and close. Now once we've entered all the information of the deposit, we then click create lease, and your lease is created, as simple as that.
Perfect. Waylon, I have a couple questions. The first one I just want to deal with is we have a question regarding how do I see all the months when my tenant paid late in his lease? Is there a view to look at that?
Okay, that view is only available if you are linked to the actual credit bureau from RentBook. And the view is only available if you have a history on the RentBook system, which means you need to physically send an invoice from when the lease started, capture the payment as the tenant made it for each month, and you will then have a history only once you are linked to the credit bureau, of which I'll show you a bit later how to link your RentBook account to automatically update the credit bureau.
Perfect. Thanks, Waz.
Okay. Now, once you've clicked create lease, at this particular point is where you can add an additional tenant to the lease. If it is a signed lease by a husband and a wife, or brother and a sister, you can then add the second tenant to the lease. So on the far right, we've got add tenant, and this basically just says, are you sure you want to add this tenant? Because you're adding the tenant to a current lease and not on its own, on a separate lease. So yes, I am sure, confirm, and then we add a new tenant, and then we just add the second tenant's details on the system. Okay, you can then also add the tenant's email address as well as cell phone number, and then save changes, and you'll see that both tenants' information will appear on the invoices, and both their payment profiles will be loaded onto the TPN Credit Bureau. Now, once your leases are loaded, you'll see that when you click on leases, you've got all your leases on the system. They are then now ready to be invoiced. So if you click on the dashboard, you'll see it's completely different. It shows you one invoice that's due. There's one deposit with no deposit. There's 2 properties, 2 active leases, 1 renewal, and 2 payments due to the landlord. So now you want to start invoicing your new tenant. So you click on leases, and if you've got a host of tenants loaded on the system, you can then filter either by the tenant's name, or you can filter by the property address. So once you've filtered, you then select the lease reference number for this particular tenant, and then click financials. Now when you click financials, you'll see it gives you a current invoice, and it tells you for when this actual current invoice is. This invoice is for December. Now you can either click on the word current invoice below financials, or on the far right of the current invoice you click edit, and it takes you exactly to the same place you need to be, which is on the actual current invoice. Now as you can see, the invoice is addressed to both tenants, which is Fred Smith and Chris Dickens, and then also on the far right it gives you an invoice number, the actual due date for this invoice, and it also gives you a payment reference number. Now this reference number is defaulted to whatever the lease is on the system, but you can then change this reference number to whatever reference you want the tenants to use when they start paying their rent. So, and you only have to do this once. Once you've done that, save. This reference number will then appear on each and every invoice that gets sent to the tenants. Okay, now on the invoice you'll see that the information we've loaded is the deposits, as well as it defaults by adding the rent each month on the invoice. We just need to add additional charges for the tenant. So to add charges, simple, click on add charge, and then type. So when you select type, there are 3 main types you can choose from. One is fees raised, and any and everything under fees raised, those are charges that you bill the tenant, which is either payable to the agent or to the landlord. Then we've got vendor charges. Those are charges you bill the tenant, whereby you are responsible to pay to the municipality or to the body corporate. That is when you load a vendor charge on the tenant's invoice. Then last but not least, we've got other charges. Anything under other charges besides the deposit due, those are charges that you bill to the tenant, which you will then in turn pay back to the owner, where the owner is liable, or he feels he wants to pay his own municipal account or body corporate account. You'll then choose utilities to landlord or other charges, anything under other charge. Now in this case, we would like to add, because it's a new lease, we know that agents and landlords charge deposit, admin fee, as well as your first month's rent on the invoice. So we're going to add an admin fee. And who is this fee due to? It is due to the agent, and then you put in the date, and then you can put in your description: admin fee, contract fee, lease fee, whatever you name that fee. and then the actual amount that you are billing to this tenant. Okay, so once you've entered all the information regarding the charge, you then click add charge, and all your charges are added on the actual invoice. Now, below the total due amount, we've got add note. Now, if you click on add note, we've got two notes on there. One is a global note, and a global note is a note where you just load it on one tenant's invoice, and it will appear on each and every tenant's invoice that you send out. Now, a global note can be something like, please note we are closed between the 20th till the 4th of January, and then notes is then specific to this particular tenant. Please note rental increase as of the 1st of January 2021, and only that tenant will see when you add it under notes. And then below notes, we've got add new delivery option. Now you'll see it shows here the invoice will be delivered to, which is the tenant. The tenant will receive a copy of the invoice via his email address, as well as the tenant will receive an SMS that reads your rental amount of X is due. Please contact, and it will have your contact number. And you, the main user, will then also receive a copy of the invoice via your email address. But if you want to add additional contact information, you just click on add new delivery option, and you can then add a new email address as well as contact number, and all those email addresses will receive a copy of the invoice via the email as well as an SMS. And which I didn't mention is when an SMS gets sent to the tenant from the system, there's no charge involved in that. No charge at all. It's free.
Because we want tenants to pay, Wes?
100% yes, Mish.
Yeah. TPN, the credit bureau, wants good tenants. We want a database of quality tenants.
100%. Okay, so if you're happy, you can then also you can preview the invoice before sending it. So you click on preview, and you'll then see see how the invoice will look before you send it out. Okay, and then also you can add your logo, which I'll show you a bit later how to do that. Okay, so once you're happy, you can then send the invoice. So when you click send invoice, it just asks you, are you sure you want to send the invoice? You click OK, and the invoice is sent. Okay, invoice is sent. Now we wait for tenant to pay. If you go to dashboard, you'll see your dashboard looks completely different. It's got one rent due. So you can, once the tenant has paid, you can click on rent due. It will bring up all your tenants, and you can then search for that particular tenant. Click on the tenant reference number, and then financials. Now here's where you can add the payments made by the tenant. So we're going to add this tenant now paid only the deposit. So we're going to add the tenant's deposit payment. So we add payment, when this tenant made payment, how the tenant made payment, and then you can add a description. Pardon. Okay, payment reference number and the amount the tenant actually paid. Okay, save payment. Now whenever you click save payment and you've sent an invoice on the system takes you to the allocation screen. Now how the allocation works, the monies first gets allocated to any third-party expenses. Like you can see here, we've got an expense for the admin fee, and then the remainder of the monies paid gets allocated to the deposit. Now we know that this tenant has paid the monies for the actual deposit. So at this particular point is where you can say clear allocations, and then you type in the amount the tenant paid, and then save allocations, so it can allocate it to the actual deposit. Save allocations, and as you can see at the top, it then shows you that now 23,000 deposit is being held. Okay, so now the tenant has paid the balance of the amount outstanding. They paid it today. EFT. Payment description, reference and the amount tenant paid. Save payment. And as you can see, when a tenant pays the full amount outstanding, it automatically allocates it. So you don't have to clear allocations or anything like that. You just click save allocations and you're done and dusted. Tenant has been as paid, tenant has been invoiced. Now the next step for us to do is we need to go and pay the landlord. Okay, so we've collected the money on behalf of the landlord. We need to go and pay the landlord and deduct our commission. So you can click on the landlord's tab. The same as on the tenant side, you can filter the landlord by the property address, or you can filter the landlord by the landlord's name. Once you've done that, you click on the landlord reference number, you click on financials, and it takes you to the landlord statement. Now, on the landlord financials, it shows you what you have in bank and what is unpaid bills, and then the difference is what we need to pay to the landlord. So if you click on in bank, you'll see what happened. We received 23,000 Rand, and 23,000 Rand was then allocated to the deposit. The deposit will never appear on the owner side as in bank. It will always be allocated to the deposit trust account. So the only monies available is the actual 21,000 Rand, and from that we can then pay the various accounts that we need to pay. So when you click on unpaid bills, it shows you the bills that you need to pay. We've got two bills. One is your admin fee, and like I said earlier, any third party expense that you load on the tenant side will appear on the actual owner's side. So we now need to pay the admin fee. So we've received this money in our trust account. Okay, we now need to pay it to our checking account. Pay now. When we paid this from our account, how we paid it, and then your description, payment reference number, and the amount is already there, so you just need to click save payment, and then you click on unpaid bills again, and next to your management fee or your procurement and placement fee, there's an amount, and then you can click pay now again. When you took your commission, and then your description, and then save payment. Now the balance is what we physically going to pay from our bank account to the landlord, so we can go and pay this on the system. So you click pay owner, the date we pay the owner, what the payment was for, payment description, and the actual amount that we paid to this owner. Save payment, done and dusted. So once you've paid the owner, you can go and provide the owner with an actual statement. So on the owner's tab, there's a reports tab. So you click on reports, owner's statement, and the owner's statement works with a date range, a from and a to date. So you need to select when you want the statement from and to. So I normally take my statements from the 15th of the month till about the 10th of the current month, from the 15th of the previous month till the 10th of the current month, to get an accurate reading of the statement. So once you've selected your from and to dates, you then click apply and then load the report. Okay, and this is how your owner statement looks. You can, from this particular point, email the owner statement directly from the RentBook system by clicking on the top right hand corner on the envelope, and it will directly email it to the owner, and you can also add additional email addresses on to receive the copy of the owner statement, or you can export the statement in PDF, save it wherever, and then email it directly from your email address to the owner. Now this is what the owner statement says to you. Income, this is the money that was received by the tenant. And then under subtraction from cash, we've first got expenses, the admin fee we deducted before we paid the owner, our placement commission, and then what we physically paid to the owner and under owner disbursements. And under adjustments is where the deposit was then allocated. And this will only appear on the first month. Okay. If you're then happy, you can then go and physically send the statement to the owner. Okay, and then what I would like to take you guys through before we have any questions is the settings tab. Now on the settings tab, there are two main aspects. One is where you can add your logo. So if you click on settings, we've got different tabs. But the important ones I want to mention is to add your logo, as well as to link your account from RentBook to TPN. So if you click on invoice, the default colors and logo you'll see is the blue and black, and the logo will be the TPN RentBook logo. If you want to change your colors to resemble your logo, you can then go and change and save it, and this will appear on your invoices and statements. But you can also at this particular point add your logo. So you just click choose file, click on where your logo is stored. The system then also tells you in what dimensions the logo should be, and also what format the logo should be in. Okay, so once you've chosen your logo, upload, and your logo will appear on each and every invoice and statement that it gets sent out on the RentBook system. Okay, still under settings, we've got TPN account. Now this is only applicable if you are a TPN RentBook combined TPN Credit Bureau client. This is where you can add or link your account to automatically be updated on the RentBook on the TPN system. So on RentBook, you go to settings, TPN account, you enter your TPN login code, your password that was provided to you by TPN, and then you confirm your password and you click test and save. Once you click test and save, it opens up a bureau notifications, which will then give you your TPN account number, your agency code, and then we've got a notify option. Now we've got two options that you will only see, which is SMS to tenants, send SMS to tenants, or do not notify tenants. Now we do the upload from RentBook to TPN on the 5th, the 10th, and the 20th of every month. You need to make sure payments are captured a day before, because we do it at midnight of the 5th, midnight of the 4th, the 9th, and the 19th. Okay. When we upload the information, depending on what notify option you choose, the tenants will either just be uploaded to TPN without any notification, which means they will not receive an SMS that reads, "Thank you for your payment," or "Credit alert, you have not paid your rent." Or you can choose the option to send SMSs to tenants, and then the tenants will receive an SMS of "Thank you for paying your rent," or "Credit alert, you have not paid your rent." And these SMSs are absolutely free. You heard right? Free. So once you've chosen whichever notify option you want, you just click save. And on those days, which is the 5th, the 10th, and the 20th, the tenants will either receive SMSs or not receive any SMSs. I urge you to do this particular part, to link your account from RentBook to TPN only when you are comfortable with using the RentBook system. The other thing is your information cannot feed through from TPN to RentBook, only from RentBook to TPN. So going forward, all your information, you only load it on RentBook, and it will then automatically feed through to the TPN system. Okay, Mish, do we have any questions?
Yeah, Wes, I've got questions I need you to answer. The first question that I think is important is we had a question to ask, what happens if my tenant and the landlord agree that they only need to pay on the 5th? Then when I capture the payment on the 5th, it says that they paid late.
Okay, so when you load the actual lease, it gives you an option for a due date. Okay, let me just go there quickly. But you need to set it up when you actually load the lease. So when you go to the lease details, it has a due day, and the 1st is defaulted. You can then change it to the 5th.
And I can go in and do that now.
Yes.
Midway
yes.
through the lease.
So you can go and do that, but please feel free to contact us to assist you so that you do it the right way. But when you set it up from the word go, it will be correct by invoicing the tenant the 5th each and every month.
Because, Waylon, we also have government employees, and a lot of 15th is a date that's also chosen as well. 100%. And then your paid on time will be based on what their due date is. That's
100%.
Brilliant. Okay. I've got a question from Nicholas, who says, what do I do if I have a tenant in the property and then midway through the tenant, there's a second tenant that wants to be added? Can I credit vet both applicants?
Okay, so you can credit vet the applicant. Okay, so basically you load the tenants as applicants on the RentBook system, but you are unable to add a tenant onto the property on RentBook because there's already a lease on place on the RentBook system. In order for you to add a new tenant to a lease, you need to first cancel the lease. Once you've canceled the lease, then only you can add a new tenant on the actual property.
And Waylon, that's important because say, for example, you had a tenant in a property for a whole year and the tenant was paying late every single month. Then we come and we add a second tenant midway through the lease. We would update their credit profile.
Yes, 100%. That is why I mentioned when adding the second tenant to this property, to this lease, it's adding the tenant to this particular lease and not adding the tenant as an additional lease on the system.
Forward. Okay, yes. So importantly for Nicholas then, if he's got a tenant in a property and we want to bring an additional tenant on board, a new lease would need to be signed between the new applicant, and we would then close this lease and open a new one on RentBook, and that would then facilitate that. Nicholas is worried though, what happens if the second tenant, and I'm using Nicholas' words, is fraught? Then what do we do?
You won't place the tenants.
My suggestion is you don't want to place a fraud tenant, and so the landlord, ultimately it's their choice as to whether they want to accept the second tenant or not. Then I've got a question regarding interest. Samantha wants to know is, can RentBook automatically load interest if the payment for rent is late?
No, unfortunately not. So you'll need to add the actual interest on the system as a charge. So when you go to add charge, you'll see there is a tab for interest on the system. The same goes for interest on your deposit. You need to work the interest out manually and add it on the system as well manually.
And that's because, Waylon, we don't understand the interest rates that are being used by the various different users. Okay, perfectly. I've got a fabulous question about lease agreements. And can I print or email the created lease for signature?
That's a very interesting question. That was when the new RentBook was written, it's one of our development projects that we want done. Currently, no, but hopefully with the future development, you will be able to load the information on the system and then you'll be able to print out an actual lease agreement on RentBook. Currently, you'll have to use the TPN lease agreement or whatever lease agreement you are currently using, but you can then scan the lease agreement or save it somewhere and then add it on the system as an attachment for you to have. So to add attachments, you then go to the actual lease, you then select the note tab and then attachments, and then you can add your lease agreement as an attachment on the actual system.
I've got some better news though. I'm desperate. When I saw that question, I'm just desperate and dying to share it. So we have been ways, as you know, Freddie's been working
on
our doc pack,
yes,
our doc pack system, and the doc pack system is our new online lease.
It's a document writer, basically.
It's a document writer with
Yes.
physically we're going to add electronic signatures to it, and our clients will then be able to use the DocPack electronic signature for facilitating applications, signing of lease agreements. For our clients, we started the project as we entered lockdown on the 27th of March, and to say that we have a dedicated person writing the software and going through the iterative process, we do not lie. We're now in November and we started in March, but we're pretty close to being able early in the new year, I think, to be able to provide those. We've written the software from scratch, start to finish. It's all TPN proprietary software that we can bring our clients, which means it's affordable. And that's always been the problem with electronic signatures, the affordability of it.
Yes, Mish.
Celeste wants to know, will this system help for year-end financial, where we can send the landlord all of their transactions from a tax perspective?
Yes, most definitely. So to provide the landlord with the tax statement for financial year, and it's pretty straightforward. You go to the actual property. So when you go to the properties, you click on that specific property, and on the property there's a reports tab, and under financial report there's tax report, and you can then choose the tax period. Now I've only got the 2021 tax period information on here, so I can only select 2021, and then you can choose to have it shown summary or show details, and then load report. And the same as the owner statement, you can then export it into PDF and then email it from your email address, or you can email it directly from the system to the actual landlord.
Brian, Waylon, I'm watching Brian, who's also from the office, and he's reminding all of our delegates to fill their feedback forms in. Can you just remind our delegates on the chat? I've added the feedback forms, if they could kindly complete those.
Delegates, please fill in your feedback forms. There is a link sent to you guys to complete the feedback forms. And also please remember to like and subscribe our YouTube channel.
Right, I think we're reaching the end of the questions. Ibenda's also asked, will DocPack also have the option for inventories to be signed as soon as it was done? Yeah, we're going to open it up and people can fill in whatever documents that need to be signed electronically. 100%. And we're getting lots of thank you ways, a lot of feedback in terms of enjoyment of the session. Wilhelmine wants to know, can she invoice separately for deposit and rent and admin fees, where the deposit goes to the trust and the rent and the admin fees directly to the business account?
Yes, 100%. So when you load the lease information, you load it as per normal. When you get to your first invoice, the important thing is to change your due date and remove the rental from the invoice. The reason to change your due date is so that you can create the invoice with the rent on for the following month. But if you do need information, please contact us at rentbook@tpn.co.za, and we'll be glad to assist you. Our information will be below.
Fantastic. Waylon, that concludes all of our questions and answers for the day. I think we've gotten through all the Q&A. Just for our delegates, thank you for attending. It's been fabulous to host. We'll, of course, post this live. So as soon as we're done, we're going to post it live, Waylon.
Yes.
Waylon's always available for questions.
100%.
Yeah, directly.
Thank you so much. And if you do need any further assistance, please feel free to contact us and we'll be glad to assist you. Thank you guys. Hope you enjoyed the training session. Thank you.